Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rano. I'm the moderator here for our Senate candidate forum for our revolution for the New Jersey Senate seat. We've got a few good candidates to join, and let me get- we've got a few good candidates to join, and it's very different this year where we have a few progressive candidates. So we thought it might be a good idea to have a candidate forum. And we invited the Senate candidates. Larry Hamm has joined us now. So we'll just go ahead and get started with our questions. So let's open up, Larry, with some of the background. Like, what makes you a good candidate to represent New Jersey in the Senate? What special abilities and experiences do you have that really sets you apart from others, and why should people vote for you?
Well, I think foremost, um, among those characteristics that would make me a good candidate and would be a good reason for people to vote for me has been my consistent advocacy for working people and poor people in the middle class, for people of all races for the last 53 years. I bring 53 years of experience in the struggle for racial, social, and economic justice to bear. And I can think of no better place than to bring the benefit of that experience than the United States Senate. And that is one of the reasons that I'm running. I've been in the movement since I was 17 years old. And it started when I led my first organized protest at the age of 17, a walkout at Arts High School, a march downtown Newark, and a sit-in. And as a result of that, I was appointed to the Newark Board of Education and served for 3 years. And at the end of that 3-year term, I was the youngest candidate to run for the Newark City Council. And even then, I was running against the establishment, so to speak. And after that period, I returned to Princeton University, where I was one of the organizers of the anti-apartheid movement at Princeton University's campus for 4 years, 4 years of protests that culminated in my senior year, 1978, 66 days of consecutive protests that led to a takeover of Nassau Hall and compelling Princeton to divest from a number of the major corporations that were doing business with the racist apartheid regime. I returned to Newark in 1980, and amongst my political goals has always been trying to find ways to build people's power, grassroots power. And I ran for district leader in 1980. And instead of just being a conventional district leader, I organized a district assembly in my district that met on a monthly basis and got involved not only in issues in our neighborhood, but also in issues at the state and national and international levels. They organized a 400 family member fuel oil cooperative, and where people collectively purchased home heating oil and were able to get less than the market rate by doing so. That was called the People's Energy Cooperative. And then, of course, the main goal being a political organization, we established in 1982 the People's Organization for Progress, which will celebrate its 42nd anniversary this year. Early on in the history of POP, we were active in the Jesse Jackson campaigns of 1984 and 1988, supporting the progressive agenda of the Rainbow Coalition. POP continued to organize around all the issues affecting urban areas, and certainly a great many of those affecting working people and poor people, Black people and other people of color in general over the decades. I had learned about Bernie Sanders early on, probably sometime during the 1988 campaign when Bernie Sanders had endorsed Jesse Jackson um, because of the progressive agenda. Remember, the roots of this progressive agenda go back to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Many of the things we think are being advocated for the first time, people were calling for those things when King was still alive. He was calling for them, and they were echoed during the Poor People's Campaign. But in 2016, Bernie Sanders ran for president, and I was excited by his campaign, and I ended up becoming a delegate for Jesse Jackson and was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention with more than, I think, 1,200 other delegates for Bernie Sanders there at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia in 2016.
Thanks,
And then in
thanks, Larry.
2020,
I think we're out of time for
overtime?
questions, so
Okay.
we have to
All right.
move along
We
to
have
the
to
next
keep it
one.
going.
So
All right.
Nina will hold up the sign when you've got 30 seconds left. Maybe
All
next
right.
time
I
give
can't,
a warning as
I
well.
have to see her. I didn't see the sign.
Okay, I'll give you a warning next time. So
Yeah.
we'll move on to our first question on housing. So one of the issues that we have in New Jersey is the rising housing costs. And we've got some
Hmm.
of our legislators talking about bringing back the state and local tax, the SALT deductions. And
Yes.
there's also a program called Stay New Jersey to help seniors keep their homes. But really, there's not a lot being done for renters or first-time home buyers who are leaving
Right.
the state. So what do you think the federal government can do to help with safe and affordable housing here in New Jersey?
Well, just to back up for a minute, certainly bringing back the SALT um, tax exemption, that would help homeowners because a lot of homeowners are struggling too. The tenants are struggling, everybody's struggling for decent housing. And New Jersey has one of the highest rates of homeowner evictions in the country. And so certainly anything we could do to bring relief to homeowners. So I would certainly support legislation to bring SALT back, which was deep six during the Trump administration, I believe, um, to help tenants. What we must do first and foremost is establish a foundation where we recognize housing as a human right and not housing as a profit center. Once you begin to once you work from there, that everybody has a right to decent housing and affordable housing, then we're at least going in the right direction. So that's one thing we have to do. The second thing we have to do, we need a national housing construction program. Right now, the United States is about, I believe, 2 million units behind where we should be. And this lack of housing is, and also landlords uh, keeping housing off the market is helping to drive, and I'm talking about corporate landlords and big landlords now, is helping to drive up the cost of housing. So we got to get the federal government back in the business of building housing and building housing for low-income people and for working people. So the third thing we have to do is change the rules. And right now, when people talk about affordable housing, they're talking about affordable housing at the market rate of affordability. Whereas we should use in our federal formulas, we should use area mean income. So if a developer is going to come into a city and he says he's going to build affordable housing, the affordability should be based on the mean income of the people in the area where the housing is going to be built. so that the people who live in that area, should they be displaced by this construction, can in fact afford to get the new housing that's being constructed. So we have to change the formula to area means income, and not based on the average market rate of affordability. We have to get the federal government back in the business. I mean, we still have federal housing, but the federal government is not building federal housing the way it did after World War II to provide housing for all of those GIs that were returning from World War II. If we engage a national housing construction program, it can also be a major jobs program. And it can be a jobs program that will provide jobs at a living wage, not at a minimum wage, but a jobs at a living wage. And when I say a living wage, I'm talking about a living wage right now in the state of New Jersey is somewhere around $35 an hour. So that's what I would do. I would propose and support legislation for a national housing construction program that could also be part of a national jobs program, along with infrastructure, road, bridge, etc. infrastructure.
Okay, thank you for that response. Definitely agree with a lot of the points you brought up there. And a national housing program, I think, would be a great idea.
Yes, and it can be done. It was done. It was done during
Absolutely.
the 30s and after World War II. We could do it again.
It's, yes, especially, you're absolutely right. It's been done before. We're not reinventing the wheel here. So
Right.
our next question is about immigration. Obviously, New Jersey is a very high immigrant population. And certainly we haven't had much activity in the national government making any progress with any deal to reform immigration. So what would your plan be to deal with immigration and what's happening on the border? Would you give dreamers the right to stay here permanently? How would you tackle the longstanding unfairness of immigration policies, which really right now favors European immigrants over all others in getting
Right.
visas?
Well, first and foremost, let me say I support DACA. Have always supported DACA. And yes, I'm in support of letting those dreamers, as they were called, a decade or so ago, letting them remain here as citizens. They've been raised here, so they've been working and raising families and everything else, going to school and everything else. So let's just move forward and let them have permanent citizenship. I support DACA. I think the thing that has to happen with regard to the United States immigration policy is that it must be reoriented and put on a base of human rights. We must treat immigrants like human beings. And quite frankly, uh, the way that the United States has treated many of the immigrants coming from the South, and when I say the South, I'm talking about south of the Mexican border and in the Caribbean and so on and so forth, has been abominable. And we've been violating their human rights. I mean, to split up families, to separate, that has to end. Separation of families has to end. Taking children from families has to end. That has to end. Caging people, that has to end. Putting up barbed wire and all kinds of things designed to kill people, that has to end. Letting people starve in the deserts of New Mexico and Texas, that has to end. Shooting and killing immigrants coming across the border. We must recognize human rights. We must bring our immigration and our immigration policy in line with international law and the conventions, on the United Nations conventions on immigration. Once we've established that, then we can at least kind of bring to a halt some of these atrocious abuses of human beings that has been going on at the border. And we must end the racism in our immigration policy. I mean, we let some immigrants come here, and I'm talking about even immigrants from the South, but we won't even let Haitian boats reach our shores. You know, we're turning around Haitian boats and causing people to die right there in the Caribbean Sea on our southern border there. So we have to have a non-racist immigration policy, and then we must find um, we must find a way, a path for citizenship for the 11 million. There are 11 million or more undocumented persons in the United States. And quite frankly, one of the reasons that our economy hasn't crashed has been because of the use of immigrant labor over these recent years. So we have to find a path towards citizenship for those folks that are here. We have to have a humane immigration policy, and then lastly, we must provide the adequate funding needed for the institutions that function at the border to process folks coming in. There are not enough immigration courts, not enough immigration judges, not enough staff. All of that needs to be bolstered, and the federal government must put the money forward for that.
Thank you so much. It's certainly a political problem, but it's a human problem as well. So I really do appreciate your answer there.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is on healthcare, which is a top subject for our group. We've
Mm-hmm.
certainly been advocating for Medicare for all. Healthcare options in the U.S., they're very poor compared to other industrialized nations, despite the higher costs that we have here. And there's also a lot of inequality in healthcare that includes, race, gender, and geographic lines. What's your vision for effective and affordable healthcare in this country moving forward?
Well, my support for universal health care goes all the way back to 1972. Actually, before that, but let's use 1972 as a benchmark because I was the youngest elected delegate to the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, in 1972. And you can actually access through Google or other platforms the National Black Political Convention agenda of 1972. That's the agenda that came out of the convention. And at the top of the agenda was universal health care. That's been a demand that people have been making for decades. And I'm proud to say that at the age of 18, I voted for the agenda and I voted for universal health care and have continued to support it at various points over the past decades. Jesse Jackson had it in his campaigns of 1984 and 1988. And of course, we're well aware that Bernie Sanders has been a champion of Medicare for all. So we all support, I support, I said I support universal health care, Medicare for all. But the situation is we need more than that. Right now, just this week, I heard that yet another hospital is being closed in New Jersey. It's Carewell, formerly known as East Orange General Hospital. This may be somewhere around the 35th, maybe even 40th hospital to close in New Jersey in the last 3 decades. This is an abomination that we have hospitals closing throughout the country. We didn't have enough hospital beds when we had the COVID. People were being treated in tents outside of hospitals. The morgues were filled. We had refrigeration trucks. It showed us how underdeveloped our hospital infrastructure is. If I'm elected to the United States Senate, I would propose the establishment of a national health infrastructure protection and development fund to prevent the closure of not one more hospital in the United States of America, and where possible, to reopen the hospitals that have been closed, and to help those hospitals that may have financial difficulty, to keep them from going into bankruptcy and to keep them from closing. Much of our disparity in healthcare outcomes is the result in the disparity in healthcare infrastructure between wealthy communities and poor communities. So I support Medicare for all as a long-term goal, but in the intermediate between now and when we can get to Medicare for all, we must stop the closure of hospitals in the United States of America, because the next pandemic, the outcome will be worse than the last one if we don't have the healthcare infrastructure to deal with it.
It's very good points that you brought up. Certainly, Nina brought up that there was another hospital in South Jersey closing, and my own brother works as a doctor in Philadelphia. The hospital where he trained shut down as well. So it's
madness. It's
yeah,
madness.
certainly, a symptom of a for-profit healthcare system.
Absolutely.
So switching gears, our next question comes on the environment and infrastructure. One of our group's top goals is to get us off our addiction of fossil fuels. One way that we can lower the US's reliance on fossil fuels is to build alternatives, like instead of building roads for fossil fuel consuming cars, we can build electrified high-speed rails for long distance travel. We can build more commuter lines for mid-range distance, and for neighborhood travel, we can build safe pedestrian and bike lanes.
Yes.
Do you support investing in projects that help cut down on fossil fuel use?
Well, absolutely. I support those projects, but more than that, I support moving our economy away from one which is based on the exploitation and use of fossil fuels to an economy that's based on alternative energy. And when I say alternative energy, I mean wind, I mean solar, I mean hydro, geothermal, etc. I don't mean nuclear. I don't consider nuclear as a viable alternative energy source, because all we do is end creating another problem with all the leftover uranium plutonium rods that we have to bury under the earth, which radiate all the earth around it. So yes, I support all of those projects that would move us away. Case in point, right here in New Jersey, we just heard last week, April 10th, that there's going to be a 15% fare increase for New Jersey Transit, for bus and rail, and it's going to be 15% this year, starting July 1, and then it's going to be 3% for a number of years, every year after that. Many people don't know that there are countries that have bus and rail systems where people don't even pay. They just get on and ride. Why can't we have that in the United States? We can't have that because essentially the auto industry, somewhere around the early to mid part of the 20th century, began to move our transportation system from a rail-based system to roads for automobiles. So we have to break our dependence on fossil fuel. We have to support mass transportation over spending more money for more roads, for more automobiles, etc. I mean, just check this out, right? China, which probably less than uh, 30 years ago was considered a third world country, China has, I believe, 6 maglev lines. Maglev is magnetic levitation. This is for the high-speed bullet trains, as they're called, as they were called, I think it was in Japan or France, in one of those places. We don't have one maglev line in the United States. Japan has it, China has it, France has it. United States is supposed to be the richest, most powerful country in the world. We don't have one maglev line. We're still talking about high-speed rail on wheels. And other countries are like, using magnetic levitation that have trains that can travel in excess of 540 kilometers per hour. That's over 300 miles an hour. You know, I don't want to keep going on because I could talk about this for a while because I'm old enough to remember, as I'm 70 years old. I'm old enough to remember when Newark still had trolleys, and when the trolleys were replaced with buses, you know, and it would cost us almost probably $1 trillion to rebuild the trolleys, because the longer you put off building rail under the kind of economy we have now, the higher the costs are in the future. So the longer we put off, building rail and light rail and subway and other things for mass transportation, the more difficult it will be for us to build in the future. So we need to start now.
Certainly do appreciate that. And I think one of the things that really gets overlooked in the infrastructure conversation is that the fossil fuel infrastructure that we have right now, it puts a lot of the burdens onto the individuals, where as a society we could pay for it. So certainly I do appreciate bringing back mass transit. So we've touched on the 4 complex issues in a short amount of time. Is there something that we didn't really cover in the questions that we picked that you're passionate about that you'd like to mention before we close with you?
Well, there are a couple of things just off the cuff. I didn't have a list, but since you asked, I think we must address the full-scale retreat of the United States from racial equality that has been occurring over the past 40 years. And we've seen it in its most recent manifestations in the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. We've seen it in the decisions on voting rights and in other ways. This will have dire consequences for the country. And the United States must recommit itself to the ideal of racial justice and racial equality. In fact, many of the disparities are once again growing. They're not diminishing. And I'm talking about disparities between Black and white people and other people of color in terms of wealth and income, disparities in employment, disparities in education, disparities in healthcare. Remember, the Kerner Commission said in, I believe it was 1968, when they issued their report, that the country was moving toward 2 nations, separate and unequal, one Black and one white. And that is as true today as it was when they said it in 1968. And if we continue to move in that direction, it can only result in more social upheaval and dislocation. So one of the things we have to address is the need to recommit ourselves, not just in word, but in deed, to racial equality. The second thing is we must address the issue of mass incarceration. The United States in prisons more people than any other country on the face of the earth. The US prison population is greater than the prison populations of China, Iraq, and Iran combined. The United States, which is 4% of the world's population, has 25% of the world's imprisoned people. We cannot continue to move in this direction. It's not feasible. Prisons don't produce anything. And the way we construct prisons and the way we organize prison life, all they serve to do is really to reinforce people's capture in those prison populations. We must stop mass incarceration. We must have full-scale rehabilitation, education, job programs for prisoners, for imprisoned people. We must end the slavery that is going on in the prisons. And in that regard, we need to approve a new 13th Amendment, because the 13th Amendment, which was approved after the Civil War, said that slavery would end for everyone except those convicted of a crime. And so that has in essence been used as a way to recriminalize the entire, a large part of the Black population. Half of the federal prison population is Black, and in New Jersey, 70% of the prison population is Black and Latino. So those are some of the issues that we have to address.
Yeah, thanks for that. Certainly, I remember, speaking with my nephew about the 13th Amendment and the fact that we still can enslave people in this country, even now, if they've been convicted of a crime. This being one of the reasons why our system has kind of evolved to do the mass incarceration. So the last thing that we'll ask you, Larry, is there a committee on the Senate that you would like to be assigned to if you do win the seat?
Well, if I have my druthers, I don't know if that would happen. I'd probably be assigned, in a similar fact. Well, I'd probably be assigned. I think they base their assignments on seniority, if I'm correct. But if I had my druthers, it'd probably be the Health, Education, and Labor Committee. That would be one place. I wouldn't mind serving on Foreign Affairs. I've been an anti-war person since I was 18 years old. Many people don't know, when I was 18, when I was on the Board of Education, one of the assembly people at that time, his name was Anthony Imperial, called on the state attorney general in 1971 to have me investigated for not registering for the draft. I was opposed to the war in Vietnam. I was opposed to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Certainly the war in Gaza that is going on right now. And I'm opposed to any war with Iran, with China. I think we should negotiate as soon as possible and end to the war in Ukraine. And I also think we should cut the military budget. We're moving now toward $1 trillion military budget, probably the biggest military budget in the history of mankind. We are the biggest spender on military in the world. And the number two nations are like billions and billions of dollars behind us. We have nearly, some people say 800, some people say 1,000 military facilities around the world. This cannot be sustained. Anyone who knows the history of the Roman Empire knows that that is not a sustainable model of development. We need to cut the military budget, except that this is the one area where I say, don't cut. And that's for the wages of the soldiers and the service people, the military service people. Many people don't know how underpaid they are. Why are our military people having, our people that are in the service right now having to use food stamps, you know, and the medical care that the military people are entitled to in our Veterans Administration hospital leave much to be desired. And I'm speaking now from my interaction with folks that are going to those hospitals right now. We must do more to take care of our vets. Why do we have homeless vets? Why do we have homeless people, period, in the richest country in the world? But especially why we send people abroad to die for us. They come back maimed physically, mentally, or both. And we can't keep them off the streets. I don't mean restraining them, but I mean giving them the help they need. It's a disgrace. Our country is one of the richest countries in the world, but socially, in terms of social development, this is a very backward country. When you look at the indices of social achievement or social development, we fall way behind countries that are far less wealthy than our own in terms of the level of healthcare, even our life expectancy. You would think, being the richest country in the world, we'd have the greatest life expectancy. We don't, because we put profits before people. And we put the military before the social budget. And that's going to be our undoing. We must do something. And let me say this lastly. I am a firm believer I am a disciple of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this is what brought me to some type of rudimentary understanding of socialism and social democracy. With all the reforms that we want, we must never forget what Dr. King said. Dr. King said we need a radical restructuring of our socioeconomic system. We need a radical redistribution of wealth and power in this country. And I think that we have to hold fast to those ideas, because sometimes in the struggle for reform, we can get so caught up in the Byzantine nature of our electoral system and our political system that we can lose sight of what it is that we really need to do. And ultimately we need systemic change, not just piecemeal reform.
Absolutely. So thank you so much again for joining, Larry. We did curate a number of other questions that we weren't able to cover today, so I'd like to send them to your campaign, and if you have an opportunity to answer them, we'd like to put the questions and responses up on our website along with this recording. So thank you again for your time, and wish you the best of luck in the ongoing campaign.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Mr. Hamm, I would like to say as well with Rano that we very much appreciate you coming and the words that you speak. I can tell from the comments that have been made all along that everybody in the audience here would love the things that you speak about to be actioned in this country here and even across the world. What you speak of is important everywhere, right?
Yes, everywhere.
I want to say thank you for me, and I know Rano did as well, but the entire audience. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you running for Senate gives us an opportunity to talk about this. So thanks again for that as well.
Okay. Have a good day.
Take care.
You too. Have a beautiful day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so I think we have a few minutes before the next candidate joins. So Well,
I didn't want to put my 30-second or the stop sign when he was speaking at the end because it was really important not to disturb what he was saying. And so I was trying to text you at the same time. I apologize, Rena.
no worries. So we'll take a quick pause until we get our next
Of
candidate.
course. Can we ask the audience, is it paused now or no yet? Not yet.
Okay, so thank you again for joining. We have our next Senate candidate, Patricia Campos-Medina, joining us as well. So we can just go ahead and start with our first question. What makes you a good candidate to represent New Jersey in the U.S. Senate? What special abilities and experiences do you have that really set you apart from the other candidates? And why should people vote for you?
So let me start by saying that I am a long time labor advocate, labor champion, union leader, labor policy advocate, labor policy researcher. I began my career as a union organizer right out of college because I was a student organizer in college, and went to Los Angeles to organize apparel workers. From there, I already had a master's in international trade. So therefore, after a year of organizing apparel and textile workers in Los Angeles and in South Carolina, Los Angeles was immigrant workers, and in South Carolina, it was Black workers and white working class workers. The union asked me to go to Washington, D.C. and become the National Legislative Director for Unite, the Apparel and Textile Workers Union. I was 27 years old when I was given the assignment to become a National Legislative Director for an international union. And to me, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, I came to the United States at 14 years old, learned English as a second language, and the daughter of a janitor and a hotel housekeeper. And when I entered advocacy for workers, I entered advocacy to advance the rights of my parents because they had 2-3 jobs, had no health insurance, had to go to work sick, or had to, we had to depend on many family members living in our own apartment so that we can make rent. And I felt that type of income inequality and lack of rights for people in the richest country in the world was unacceptable to me. And that's how I became a labor advocate, because I wanted to understand the labor laws in this country and advocate for them. So to become a national legislative director for a union that was advocating for American workers at 27 years old, it was a big responsibility. But it was also an opportunity to actually advance issues that I care deeply about. So about 27 years old, I was working at the AFL-CIO as one of the only female lobbyists, Latina female lobbyists of the AFL-CIO lobbying team when the AFL-CIO had been taken over by John Sweeney, and he had promised a change on the focus of the AFL-CIO to focus on immigrant workers and American workers. So being in a room with 80 labor lobbyists, mostly white men, and being a Latina with an accent, it just instilled in me the commitment that I was going to be the best that I could be to get policy done for American workers. My first assignment was to get the minimum wage, to go lobby for the last time we had a minimum wage increase from $5.15 to $7.25. That was in 1997. It took us 5 years to get it done in 2001. That was the last time that we increased the minimum wage. So I will say that if I am elected to go to the Senate, I will go back and make sure that we have another minimum wage increase to $17 an hour with the Raise the Wage Act. So I've been doing policy. I've been advocating for policy since I'm 27 years old. When I was lobbying in Congress, Andy King was in middle school. And so when people ask me, why are you more qualified? Why are you ready? It always amazes me that a woman has to prove its worth 3 times over a man. So I've been in Washington, I've been advocating for policy. I was at the White House advocating for PNTR, for labor rights on PNTR, for environmental rights during the CAFTA, NAFTA, for every time we had to deal with an international trade agreement. I was in Seattle when we stopped Bill Clinton and the WTO. So I have a lot of experience advocating for policy and creating policy. So I am ready. That's why I'm ready, because I know how to make policy, how to draft policy, how to do research to advocate to find solutions. And I have built coalitions from grassroots people to immigrant workers to unions and to progressives to get policy done. And that's why I'm ready to go to the United States Senate and serve as the United States Senator.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So we'll move on to our next question, which is a big issue for us here in New Jersey, which is housing. So New Jersey residents actually do face a very big problem with the rising housing costs. And right now we have, some talk about bringing back the state and local tax deductions and the federal at the federal level, and we've got Stay in New Jersey to help seniors keep their homes. But there's really not much help for renters or first-time home buyers who are leaving New Jersey. So what role do you think the federal government has in helping people get safe and affordable housing?
This is a place where the federal government has to be in partnership with the state and municipalities through the HUD, through the Housing Urban Development Authority. There is a policy. We need to reinvest in HUD so that we can go back to actually expanding the number of vouchers for affordable housing that come back to New Jersey. We also need to expand the funding so that HUD can partner with local municipalities like it has done in Newark to expand mixed income housing creation and to expand the opportunity for actually create what we call now livable communities where people actually live and work by expanding the redevelopment zones around HUD housing development housing corridors. With that said, we also need to create more support for rent control and support for renters, because we have a high number of, not everybody is able to buy a home or is able to be ready to buy a home right away. They need the ability to have affordable rental units. And that ought to be part of how we fund mixed income housing funded through HUD. So fundamentally, the federal government has to do a better job of reinstating funding through HUD and through creating partnerships and incentivizing partnerships between municipalities and between developers so that they are encouraged to creating mixed income housing every time they get some sort of support for redevelopment opportunities. So that's one area: affordable housing through vouchers, affordable housing through investment on mixed income housing development, more coordination between municipalities and states through incentivized developers to create different levels of income housing for folks, and then creating livable communities around transportation hubs, which has been something that we have been advocating in New Jersey for a long time. But ultimately, what I think we need to do is actually the issue of affordability. There's a second part before I talk to affordability. The second part is that a lot of the biggest impact on homes is in evictions and in the predatory lending around home mortgages is being felt by Black Black women and by immigrant families who get put into who get trapped into loans and mortgages that are predatory, and they are done not as an accident, but they intentionally done that way to create this system in which those families become go in the pipeline for evictions, and then they get evicted, and then it becomes a cycle of poverty. So we actually need to do a better job of creating relief for Black women and immigrant families who are stuck with predatory home mortgages that is not allowing them to actually provide safe security and housing for their families. That's another thing. The other thing is that we need to do a better job of providing affordable mortgages for first started families, for young families, so that they can create wealth. I mean, home ownership is how Black families and immigrant families create wealth. And we're making it so hard for new families to buy a home nowadays. So I think that's a matter of regulation around banking and home mortgages, and then also a role of the federal government and the state government to create community funds for mortgages that make mortgages more affordable. Ultimately, though, I think that the issue of an affordability of housing has to do with how do we create an economy that works for everyone in New Jersey. I will support the SALT deductions. The SALT deductions is something that impacts middle-class families that have high wealth. And while they deserve some relief as well, that's not the only solution to that affordability crisis in New Jersey. We also need to fight for more money back in money that we pay out. And that money should come back in the form of more support for HUD and vouchers, and more support for rent control, and more support for mixed income housing and for transportation.
I think, thank you so much for that. Certainly a balanced approach, I think, is right, and agree with much of what you said there. Our next topic is, of course, immigration, which is a big thing in New Jersey. A lot of our population is both immigrants and children of immigrants like myself. What would your plan be to deal with immigration and what's happening on the border? Would you give dreamers the right to stay here permanently? How would you also tackle the longstanding unfairness of our immigration policies, which really favor European immigrants over others for obtaining visas here in the U.S.?
As an immigrant and the daughter of political refugees from the wars of Central America in the 1980s, my father had to leave El Salvador at the beginning of the war in 1979, my mother in 1980, my older brother in 1981. And I had to wait 8 years until I was able to join them in the United States because of a broken immigration system. As someone who suffered family separation, I will always fight for the immigration reform that keeps families together and that honors the humanity of refugees. With that said, I am also a labor leader and someone that has to balance, has to always look out for how do we balance the economic needs of new workers and American workers, and how do we create a seamless path for satisfying the demands of our economy for younger workers that is actually a pulling factor of our economy from the rest of the world, and how do we create path for legal entry for those workers. 100%, my approach to immigration reform is in three layers, and you cannot do either one of them alone. You have to do them together. One, we must immediately legalize the 11 million undocumented workers who are here, beginning with our TPS holders. Those are people who have a permit to work and have been here for the last 20 years. Those are Central Americans and Haitians, and now we just had the Venezuelans. And then our DACA holders. which are the children, many of them are children of TPS holders. So, but they are dreamers. They're the ones who have gone to school here. So those should have an immediate path to citizenship because they have already been legally in the United States. For the 11 million undocumented workers, we have to create a path to permanent residency and a path to citizenship. Because if we do not do that, we do not alleviate the pull factor of migration from many people from Central America and Latin America, which is family reunification. Once you come here into the United States and you don't have ability to go back, you create a pull factor because you spend 10, 20 years without seeing your family. And the only solution is to bring them is to bring them back without documents. So we have to create that. And in order to do that, I always tell American workers, and I represent a union that represents American workers, that the best way to secure good wages for American workers is to legalize undocumented workers so that they have the same rights as every other worker. So that's one thing. The other thing that we need to do is that we need to update our refugee policy that hasn't been updated since the 1980s. We did not give political asylum to Central Americans in the 80s, and we are not giving political asylum to Central Americans today. So we need to update our refugee policy, and we actually need to fund refugee resettlement. Donald Trump defunded refugee resettlement programs, and that's why President Biden doesn't have the ability to facilitate resettlement with states and cities. And that's how resettlement has become a political ball for Republicans in the border, like Senator Abbott in Texas. So we need to fund resettlement, and we need to actually fund more judges or legalize or deputize administrative judges to process refugee applications in a timely manner. Right now, it takes between 6 months to 2 years to process a refugee application. And in the meantime, those workers don't have the right to work while they wait for their adjudication of their cases. So therefore, if we need to fund more administrative judges, we need to accelerate adjudication of refugee cases, and then we need to give refugee families a permit to work so that they can sustain themselves while they wait for the refugee status. Now, many of those people will not qualify for refugee applications. So therefore, we need to create a legal process for workers to come from Latin America to work. And I am a big advocate for creating a regional agreement on labor with Mexico and Central America, in which we grant workers what is called a portable visa, so that they can come and work and they go back and give back to their communities in their countries. Many workers will choose to go back. They don't want to stay, but they come to work because the economy needs them. So I am a proponent of a portable visa program and a labor program with Mexico and Central America. Finally, we will never solve an immigration crisis if we do not treat Latin America, Mexico, and the Caribbean as our partners. We need a foreign policy that engages Latin America as our partner in democracy creation, in economic development, in trade development, so that we reduce the push factors of migration, which is a democracy, a lack of security, the war on drugs, and the lack of economic opportunity for Latin Americans. So we need a proactive foreign policy approach to Latin America, which no one in Congress, including Andy Kim, has worked on and is even talking about.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answer. The next topic, which is one of the big ones for us, we're certainly advocates for Medicare for all here at our Revolution, is healthcare, right? So healthcare outcomes in the US are actually very poor compared to other industrialized nations, despite our higher costs that we face here. And there's also a lot of inequality in healthcare across gender, race, and geographic regions. What's your vision for effective and affordable healthcare in this country moving forward? I think you're muted.
Okay. So I just want to remind everybody on this call that I have been a champion for Medicare for All, even before I became Bernie Sanders co-chair in 2020. I was an advocate for affordable healthcare, for Obamacare, for Medicare for All for a long time. But then after we all did the work together to educate folks about Bernie Sanders in 2020, I joined our Revolution New Jersey as a statewide board member. So I've been a board member of our Revolution New Jersey since 2020. And I work very closely with all of you and with Ana Marta when she was a state organizing director to pass Medicare for All resolutions in 15 cities in New Jersey. And we, when it was in Jersey City, it was in Hoboken, when it was in Newark, I was right there trying to figure out how to get those resolutions done. So my support for Medicare for All is not a political convenience thing. I've been doing this work for a long time. So now I have been, as a labor leader, one of the most, and I have been across negotiating tables trying to get collective bargaining agreements done for workers in low wage industries like laundries, restaurants, hotels. The most expensive thing for a collective bargaining agreement is always healthcare. And workers always have to trade off between a low wage or affordable healthcare. And that is the trade-off that most workers have to do. And even as professionals, how many times have you heard workers say, I hate this job, but I cannot leave this job because I cannot lose my healthcare? That is a reality, and it's something that at some point we have to change in this country, that we cannot tie healthcare to employment. But that's how the majority of our healthcare in this country comes from our employment relationship through employers. But, as a labor leader, I have always advocated for universal healthcare. But if that is not possible because we don't have the political will to do that, to remove healthcare from our employment relationship, then the next solution is to move to a Medicare for All system. I advocated for Obamacare. I was part of the national coalition to get Obamacare enacted, but it left about 10 million workers without access to healthcare. Those 10 million workers need to be supported through expansion of Medicare for All, so that Medicare for All can actually negotiate prices and lower the cost of care and the cost of prescription drugs for those 10 million workers who have no access to healthcare because they do not qualify for Obamacare and they do not have a healthcare through a private employer. So what we are trying to do with Medicare for All is to actually cover those workers who do not have access at all, the one in the donut hole. And the only way we can do that is by expanding Medicare for All, and I have full support of Bernie Sanders' proposal to expand Medicare for All ability to negotiate prices for healthcare, for prescription drugs, and for all types of healthcare coverage for those workers who are not covered under Obamacare and are not covered on the private insurance.
Thank you very much for that answer. I really appreciate your support in the past and hopefully in the future as well. Our next question has to do with the environment and infrastructure. Certainly, another big point for our local group is to fight against the US's reliance on fossil fuels. And one way that we can do that is to build alternatives, such as electrified high-speed rail for long-distance travel, more commuter rail for mid-range distance, and also safe pedestrian and bike lanes for neighborhood travel. Would you support investing in projects that help us cut down on fossil fuel consumption?
Most definitely 100% I would support infrastructure development, green infrastructure development that reduces our reliance on fossil fuel. Let me tell you a little bit about my background on this. I am the executive director of the Worker Institute at Cornell University, the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. And I've been there 8 years. And one of the projects that we had at the Worker Institute was labor leading on climate. And about 8 years ago, we began a project to try to get unions to come on board on the idea that unions did not have to oppose green energy job creation, that we needed to move the labor movement into creating creating jobs in the green economy that were union jobs. So you can look at the Worker Institute, and we spent 10 years doing research about and trying to do convenience of labor unions and the building trades and the transportation unions to actually get them to come to a position in which they will be supporting a transition from fossil fuels, which are heavily unionized jobs, through green energy jobs, which do not have unions right now. But in order to do that, we needed to get the unions to agree to advocate for green job creation by getting elected officials and President Biden to commit to what's called project labor agreements, peace labor agreements, and agreements in which jobs created in the green energy sector will be union jobs, and that we will train through apprenticeship programs the creation of opportunity for middle-class jobs in green energy. Before the Worker Institute did that work, what we were seeing is the creation of green energy jobs with low-wage workers and immigrant workers with very low wages, and no apprenticeship programs and no project labor agreements. That's why the unions were opposing it. But until my team at the Worker Institute came together and created a table, and it took us 8 years to get some unions to actually commit to advocating for green job creation. And what we have now, and you can find it in the Worker Institute page at the ILR school, we can find a blueprint for job creation in the green energy sector that creates green energy jobs. And I remember when President Biden issued infrastructure and green energy job creation, it actually had some components of the proposal that we made around creating project labor agreements, about funding apprenticeship programs, about demanding that a certain percentage of the jobs went to women and people of color and immigrants. Those were components of the blueprint that we created about 8 years ago as partners with labor at the Worker Institute. So I am not just somebody who talks about green energy job creation because it's the fad thing to do, and someone who has been part of a team at the Worker Institute at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations, thinking through how we advocate through public policy to create partnership with labor and local municipalities and the state governments to actually create jobs in the green economy in which union workers can transition into. If we're going to shut down carbon jobs, which are high-paying jobs, we need to create a path for good jobs in the green economy. And that's what we have been doing at the Worker Institute for a long time. I am not the expert on green jobs. We have a whole team at the Worker Institute that is an expert on green job energy creation. We have developed a platform for transportation that the city of New York has adopted. We have made proposals to New Jersey that they're looking at. I have a whole team, and this is one thing that I will tell you. I am not an expert in everything, but I know how to find people that are experts at doing the right thing. And as a public official, that's what I will do. I will get the experts that know how to get this work done, because that's what I have done at the Worker Institute, bringing people who know what they're talking about in green energy, who know what they're talking about in labor rights, who know they're talking in public policy, and create policy offerings for elected officials. And you can look at what we've done with the MTA in New York City. There is a whole proposal to do the clean buses, to actually invest in rail, to update our rail system. I was in Jersey City yesterday, and there was a question about the expansion of the turnpike. And I said, unless you create a new tunnel, expanding the turnpike doesn't solve the problem of pollution for Hudson County. So what we need is actually a new rail and a new rail tunnel to move people into New York City. And that's what I will be advocating for.
Thanks, really do appreciate your answer. And certainly, the green economy doesn't need to be low-wage jobs. I certainly appreciate getting good jobs in that economy as well. And it doesn't mean that we need to lose, all those high-paying jobs as well. So we've actually touched on 4 complex issues in a short amount of time. Is there something that we didn't cover in our questions that you're really passionate about that you'd like to mention before we close? You're muted again.
Just to say that, I being a progressive, a Bernie progressive even for a long time, I being an advocate for workers, for low-wage workers, for poor people, it amazes me now that our politics is always about the middle class, and sometimes we forget that we also have to talk about the working poor and poor people, and that our policies need to support middle class families because that's sort of the American dream, to be able to be a middle class. But the more we can ignore the high level of income inequality in this country that is creating this big separation between working poor and middle class families. I just read yesterday an article in which billionaires had doubled their profits since the pandemic, while working families are stagnant and they're further in income inequality. And I think that the call of our time, and this is why all of us got involved with our revolution and with Bernie Sanders, the call of our time is to fight income inequality. The call of our time is to create power for working and poor people. And we cannot do it. We continue to accept middle of the road politicians like Andy Kim. And he might claim that he is the champion of ending the line, but we were here fighting the line before he even jumped on that bandwagon. So let's not confuse a opportunistic moment to take on an issue that we all have been fighting for as the litmus test for what is a progressive in this race. The progressives on this race have been fighting for the same issues for 20 years, and we did not come to this moment because it's the fad moment. We came to this moment because we care about poor people and working people and creating opportunity for people in working in our urban sectors, for immigrant people, and for all of us who are lacking healthcare. So I want to remind us all that our revolution and why I joined a revolution is because of the not me as revolution. And the not me as revolution call us to actually stay true to our values, which is to fight to end income inequality by fighting for opportunity for poor and working people. And that's what I am trying to do by claiming my spot in this race. I did not plan to run for this position, but I did it because the Democratic Party failed to consult urban voters, Black voters, and Latino voters about who was the best candidate for this position. And they put a candidate, a woman, that they thought was their chosen one. And I said at that moment, it is the time for a woman to go to the United States Senate, but it's a woman that has been fighting for working people for a long time. Tammy Murphy stepped down because she couldn't sell herself to voters. And now it is our responsibility of the true progressives, if we want to be true progressives, to hold Andy Kim accountable because he is a Gottheimer in disguise. And I would tell you now, if we do not hold him accountable to his positions, what we will get is another Kristen Sinema and another senator from West Virginia coming from New Jersey, going to the United States Senate. So I urge you to actually do not give him the narrative that he ended the line. We have been fighting the line for 20 years. And every woman, every Latina, every Black woman, every progressive that ran against the party in New Jersey and the Democratic Party in New Jersey brought the line down, not Andy Kim.
Absolutely. So, thank you for that response. And we certainly do appreciate you stepping up to run because it gives us an opportunity to talk about these things that really get left behind. So if you do win the seat in the Senate, is there a committee that you would like to serve on?
Oh my God, yes. I do want to serve in the, of course, transportation, because transportation is the artery of New Jersey and New York. You know, through transportation, a lot of work jobs and opportunity to make investments come to this town. The judicial committee, because that's where immigration reform, you know, that's where we do a lot of that work that needs to get done around immigration reform, and also foreign affairs, just because I also believe that we cannot solve immigration without having a proactive, smart foreign policy position with Latin America and the Caribbean, which has been totally ignored by the Foreign Affairs Committee in the United States Senate. And if I can have 4, I go to the Health and Labor Committee and actually be the Latina version of Bernie Sanders and the Health and Labor Committee.
Absolutely appreciate that answer as well. So thank you again for taking the time to speak with us. We had a lot of other questions curated that we didn't actually have a chance to cover now. We'd like to send them to your campaign. If you would be able to provide a written response, we'd like to put it up on our website along with this recording. So thanks again, for taking the time to join us and speak about some of the issues that we feel don't get covered by the other politicians. So.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Patricia, thank you so much. It's great to see you, and we want to see you on the dais talking about these policies at the convention. We expect it, by the way. This is what we want. You know, this is important to us. You know, the things that you bring to the table. I know I've said this to you before, just it's amazing. Yes, we have to hold whoever gets elected in the Senate accountable to we have to push our agenda, and we have to make sure it's there, no matter who it is, right? If it's you, we're going to torment you. If it's Larry, we're going to torment him. And if it's Andy Kim, we're going to torment him too. And we should be bothering Cory Booker right now. Yes,
we should. We should focus. Yeah, we should make sure that everybody, I mean, that's part of it, right? I always say it's one thing to be an advocate, it was thing to be a government, but you always have to remember who got you elected, and sometimes people forget once they get to DC. Right.
Yeah, they do. Oh. Thank you so much again. Rano and I really appreciate it, and so does the entire audience that is here, and then the ones who will be seeing it later. So we thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Okay, so I think we're ready to close. I just wanted to, before we sign off, to just thank the volunteers that helped put this together. Nina, who was our timekeeper, and Esther and Catherine, who were on our candidate forum committee that helped us formulate the questions. I'll put up this recording as soon as we can, and as soon as we receive the results back from the other questions, I will put them up as well. Our website is ormiddlesex.com. Thank you so much for your attendance. Hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Bye. Andy Kim was unable